Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett have gone further than any other researchers in establishing the facts behind the legend. Since 1977, they have been re-evaluating the most ancient British texts. Some of their astonishing findings have been published, but it is only now that the full story can be told. Not only have they identified two Arthurs, but they've also found physical evidence to support their claims. Their research shows a long-crafted conspiracy to rewrite our history and deny our true heritage.
Caxton started printing in England, in London, in 1474, and the English Parliament immediately passed a law prohibiting printing in Wales. And you weren't allowed to print anything in Wales till 1692, 200 years later. And by then the damage was done. Ideas had been set in stone. Several times English kings and parliaments passed laws prohibiting the use of writing materials in Wales. I don't know if you know that. Yeah, it was against the law to actually own a pen or a piece of paper. It's lost in Wales because the education system was controlled by London. London in 1846 replaced every Welsh-speaking schoolteacher in Wales with an Englishman who couldn't speak Welsh. They did. They imported them by the hundred. They sacked every Welsh schoolteacher. So you had a monoglot population speaking Welsh, with about 10% of them being bilingual, speaking English. And you had every schoolteacher who spoke only English. I mean, the situation in the classrooms must have been absolutely diabolical.
And another thing you mentioned is that King Arthur was taught in Welsh schools up until 1926.
Yeah, King Arthur was taught as the king, son of King Maurice, and grandson of King Theodoric, until about 1924, certainly. So I got one book. Chris Barber managed to get 3 old Welsh books. Then he took over the school system and it became anglicised, and out went King Arthur. And I had a school book of that era, King Theodoric, King Maurice, King Arthur, you know. Well, everybody knew.
The book that really brought Arthur to the attention of the world was The History of the Kings of Britain, written in 1135 by Geoffrey of Monmouth. Arthur's name had been recorded before, but it was this work that portrayed him as a knightly king, chivalrous in all his deeds.
Now, the problem immediately was that he proclaimed an Arthur who fought the Romans, and an Arthur who fought and defeated the Saxons and others. The immediate problem is that you have a 200 and maybe 25 or 250-year-old king. This was pointed out by Polydore Virgil, the historian for Henry VIII of the Six Wives, and said, look, this is impossible. You've got a 250-year-old king here. He can't fight the Romans and the Saxons. So what we're dealing with is two very real people. Arthur won, right, about 340 to 400. Arthur II, 503 to 579. And they've pushed the two together into one. Made him a gigantic figure. This was immediately used to say all this history is false. So it's fairly obvious that he's two people.
Right.
And the man who fought the Saxons in the 6th century is a 6th generation direct descendant in the male line, and he is Arthur II. So you do have two kings, 200 years apart, both of them warrior kings. One fights the Romans, one fights the Saxons. There's a group of manuscripts known as the Brecon manuscripts. Again, these are always quoted by diligent people looking for Arthur. And in the Brecon manuscripts, I think it's the Harleian 4181. And again, I think it's the British Museum Vespasian A14. Again, you've got lists of the parentage and so on, ancestry of Brecon of Brecon. His mother was Marshall, who is a sister of King Meurig, so which makes Arthur and Brecon to be first cousins. And then it goes back King Tudrig, King Tithfalt, Theodosius, all the way back to Arthur I and Magnus Maximus. And in this way, we know more about our ancestors in Britain than they are your ancestors. Just because kept in Wales doesn't mean a damn thing, right? They're all our ancestors, and we know more about them than any other country in Europe.
Their search now took them to Cardiff, and to the site of one of the oldest cathedrals in the country. With a mixture of the old and new, its windows clearly demonstrate its links with King Arthur of Glamorgan. Its ancient charters, republished by Allen and Barham in their book called The Charter of the Kings, established without doubt the dynasty of the Glamorgan kings. But what did these charters tell them?
They list the kings, and they list the king's family, his brothers, his sons and some of his daughters and cousins and nephews and so on. Because these people are the nobility and they attend important land granting ceremonies with the church. On the church side you get the bishop, usually the 3 local abbots and their senior clergy. Now what is happening, as the charters go on down the centuries, a king dies and the bishop serves the next king, or the bishop dies and another one comes in, and they overlap each other. And so you can get a clear picture of who was who by linking them together in this overlapping fashion down the centuries. And you also see the sons coming in as witnesses and later becoming kings themselves and so on, witnessing these charters. And so it's possible to create a pretty extensive who was who for the entire period of around 400 to 1100.
Be it known to the clergy and people of southern Britain that Arthurius, king of the region of Gwent, granted to God and to St Duffrig and St Tylo, and in the hand of Bishop Comrig, the Church of Simvark.
Now from this one charter alone, and there are others, it's patently obvious that Arthur succeeded King Meurig as king. These charters and the lists of kings which can be extracted can then be compared with lives of the saints. All the saints were royal and noble people. You couldn't be a saint unless you were royal, you see. And obviously saints had mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and so on, and saints also married. They didn't believe in celibacy like the Roman Church. And so you have the lives of the saints give you further linked genealogies, which link in with the land of charters.
One such saint is Tylo, who was a son of Marshall and a cousin of Arthur. His tomb is in Llandaff, as is St Duffrig's, the bishop who crowned Arthur. Though many have tried to dismiss these charters, these tombs are just one small piece of the jigsaw that demonstrate that these people were real.
We take this exhibition a little further. We know that Magnus Maximus, who was Emperor of the West, 383 to 88, had 2 wives, Kainrech, the mother of Arthur I, and descendants. Helen, daughter of Udaf, and descendants. All well known, all well publicised. So King Arthur, either Arthur I or Arthur II, they're not isolated, unknown people, a wandering Goth, and a leftover Roman. They are kings of a mighty dynasty. They've got ancestors, they've got descendants, they've got cousins and brothers and uncles and aunts and all sorts. And this is only a fraction of what we know, and what's known to everybody else. So you've got Arthur I and his descendants coming down to Arthur II. Arthur I, Tathel, Tithfalt, Tudrig, Meurig, Arthur II. A bringing together of the imperial lines of Britain. And so the idea that he's unknown is inconceivable. You either have done no research, no work whatsoever, and you know nothing at all to say that, or alternatively, you're simply not telling the truth.
Hal Dar, or Hal the Good. Around 920 AD, a king list was drawn up for the wedding of his son, Prince Owen. This document, called the Harleian 3859, still survives today in the British Museum.
The first real clue on this comes in the most famous of British manuscripts, is the Harleian 3859. And there are king lists, and list number 4 starts off with Mascin Wedig, who is Magnus Maximus.
It contains the names of both Arthurs.
383, the armies of the British invaded Gaul. The general of Magnus's armies was his son Arthur. The Latins called him Andragathius, and he defeated Gratian, the Emperor of Rome. He defeated Gratian in battle at Soissons, which they called the Battle of Sassy in Geoffrey of Monmouth, chased him to Lyons, Lugdunum, invited him to a meal and executed him. They defeat Gratian. Arthur chases Gratian down to Lyons and invites him to supper and kills him. So Magnus becomes Emperor of Rome and the West. And there's a mosaic in the Modena Cathedral, about 1100, showing the siege of Paris by Arthur and his men, and that is Arthur I. Crosses into the Balkans, and he's now confronted with the Emperor Theodosius of the East. And two big battles are fought, one at Sisica, on the Sisica River, the other at Poetovio. And Arthur, he's had the worst of it. He's outnumbered greatly, and he goes home, you see. The Romans were kicked out of Britain, by the way, in 322 by King Eudaf. They weren't in Britain. They were in and out of Britain like the bishop in the proverbial brothel. You know, this idea of 400 years of Roman rule has to be Mickey Mouse. It's a joke. It has no truth whatsoever. And you've also got the folk tale of Guy of Warwick. Guy in Welsh is Gwir, means the man of Warwick, you see. And that again tells the exact story of Arthur I. And he has sons, and presumably daughters. They were finally defeated in the Balkans, two big battles in what is now, or was Yugoslavia. They're changing it now, aren't they?
Yes, Croatia
and battle on the Sisica River, Sisa, and a battle at Poetovio. And Arthur had to withdraw back, and a surprise move by Theodosius, the Emperor of Constantinople, captured Magnus at Ravenna. And
my namesake. So what was Arthur I's territory that he ruled?
His territory would have been the Midlands of England, Warwickshire and across there, Shropshire, maybe as far as Leicester, and North Wales, Powys, because there wasn't a Wales in England then, it was just Britain.
Yes, but they're not South Wales, because I believe there was some connection with Glamorgan.
Yeah, he had a brother who is buried in Lanhilleth, and that's in the Songs of the Graves, very clearly outlined. You go along and there's a great big grave mound right on target. He would have been titular over most places. They'd have all said, he's the boss, you know. So that's the way it would have worked. But there were kings in Wales, obviously.
Right.
Where's the kingdom? It's not a principality, it's a kingdom. You've got to get that in your head. If you want to trace Arthur I, you look at William of Malmesbury and others, and they tell how he fortified the Lichfield area. And there are evidences of great fortifications in the general area. Arthur is said to be buried in the great ancient churchyard where multitudes of the illustrious of the British are buried. So you're looking for a great ancient churchyard with whacking big graves in it. Lots of them. And there is such a place where huge mounds and monumental tombs exist in large numbers. There's a place called Oldbury, the old burying place. And it's at Atherstone, Atherstone, Arthur's Twin, Arthur's grave mound in Warwickshire. And that's where you're going to find King Arthur, as mentioned by the medieval historians.
It was here that they made an amazing discovery.
And it was with the prod method of prodding that we found several things, but with this prod method, we hit a stone. There are letters on it. It appears to say something, but it means you have to sort of finish the words off. But it was the same as when we found other things. You know, what do we do with this? Because they're never going to believe it anyway.
The preserved words on the stone are in Latin. The first word is nearly complete, Artorius, or Arthur. Isit means cast down, and Masai could be part of his father's name, Maximus.
He died around 400, we think.
400, this is AD.
80, oh,
yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Arthur I has a son, Tathal, Theodore, right?
Yes.
He has a son, Teuthrin, Theodorus, right? Theodorus, right? He has a son, Teuthfald, who is Theodosius, who became king, big king. He defeated the Saxons after a terrible massacre. Right. His son was Tudrig, Theodoric, who's buried at Mathen, and has been twice excavated, the wound in his skull. His son is Moerig, which is Morris.
Yes.
And we know where he is. And his son is Arthur II. So 6 generations down the male line, we've got Arthur II.
Right.
In the Brutes of England, written between the 10th and 15th century, Arthur is clearly recorded.
Now, King Arthur is given quite a significant place in these histories. He gets quite a lot of space. And the coverage is, again, melding together, or welding together, King Arthur I and King Arthur II. Now, if we look at King Arthur II, we'll find there's a very interesting reference to him in the Brutes of England. And you've got to remember that up until modern times, this would have been generally firmly believed as authentic history. So in chapter 79, it's telling how King Arthur is over in France, Brittany area. And it's on about the Easter time. And it says, "And when King Arthur had thus his knights feasted at April after next sowing," sowing being springtime, "he came again into Britain, his own land. And after at Whitsuntide next sowing, by counsel of his barons, he would be crowned King of Glamorgan." So everybody in Britain, certainly England and Wales, would have been in no doubt whatsoever from the Brutes of England that King Arthur II, at least, was a king of Glamorgan and Gwent, certainly king of Glamorgan. There can be no doubt about this. It's a very clear statement.
From these genealogies, it's possible to place Arthur into the 6th century.
One prominent means of dating is Arthur had a sister named Anna, and Anna had a son named Samson. Samson of Dol, as he was known, actually moved over to Brittany. Dol is over there. He attended and signed the papers of the Second Council of Paris in 556. So if Samson is signing the papers as a fairly young cleric, actually, in 556, King Arthur is his uncle, his mother's brother, has got to be of the same era.
What was the kingdom of Arthur II? Was that the same kingdom, North Wales?
Well, I think you've probably got a copy, but he was pronounced and proclaimed King of Glamorgan.
It was now time for Alan and Barham to go in search of the grave of Arthur. They knew that there was a tradition of him and his queen being buried at Glastonbury in Somerset, but that, as they quickly discovered, was unlikely.
Glastonbury Abbey in Somerset was founded by an English king in 941. And the first abbot was St Dunstan in 942. Now, if Arthur II dies in 579, then we're at least 450 years too late with Glastonbury and Somerset. As another factor, Arthur is said to be buried in the great and ancient graveyard where multitudes of the great and illustrious of the British are buried. There is no great ancient graveyard at Glastonbury. It appears that Henry II had something to do with this promotion of the idea of Arthur in Somerset. So Henry II, in order to be king of Britain as such, wanted justification. Now, if he could claim to be the heir, if only by sort of linked royal succession of some sort, or the fact that he was a king of England, if he could prove that Arthur was a king of England in England, and he was then a later king of England, if Arthur ruled the whole of Britain, then so Henry II was entitled to rule the whole of Britain. Justification. And so it looks as if he prompted his cousin, at Glastonbury, the abbot, to dig up Arthur at Glastonbury, and that would provide Arthur being out of Wales, away from Wales, and into England. Arthur's an ancient English-British king, and therefore Henry II is entitled to rule Wales, Scotland, and England. Very simple.
If Arthur, King of Glamorgan, was not buried at Glastonbury, then where was his grave? Alan and Barham knew that the histories were the key, and that they were pointing to a place called Caer Caradoc. There were other clues to its location, but find Caer Caradoc, they reasoned, and you find his grave. In King List 28 there is mention of a Glamorgan king called Arthuriz or Arthmau, a 6th generation descendant of Arthur I.
You get a line of princes. You get a son of Arthur I, Tathal, then Taithrin the Subtle, Taithfalt or Theodosius, Tudrig, Theodric, Meurig, Maurice, and then Meurig's son, Arthur II. And so you've got two Arthurs very clearly exhibited. These are not hidden. You find them clearly in the manuscript evidences that everybody else uses when they're writing about British history. So they're harder to miss than they are to find.
Why is it then that we have all this sort of weird King Arthur industry and there's people saying, oh, he's in Glastonbury and somewhere, you know, in Cornwall and they've mixed them all together. If it's so in the records, why has no one else found them?
Well, religious and political, manoeuvring for various, reasons. What we're going to do, subsequent to this, is to go out into the field, as university people like to say. We're going out to show how to trace the grave of Arthur II. We know that King Tudrig, his grandfather, was an Uther Pendragon, but we also know that he's buried in Mathen Church, where he's been dug up twice, 1609 and 1881. But we've got an Uther Pendragon buried at a place called Caer Caradoc in the late 6th century. Now this is not an obscure reference. We've got 168, there were 167, but another one's been found a year ago, 168 copies of the Brutes of England, the manuscript handwritten. And they say Uther Pendragon is buried at Caer Caradoc. It can't be the Uther Pendragon Tudrig, he's at Mathen, and it's towards the end of the 6th century. So, to us it's logical this is probably the Uther Pendragon Arthur. Similar information of an Uther Pendragon buried in the Giant Circle at Caer Caradoc exists in Matthew of Westminster. It's supplemented and it's reinforced by evidence in the Brut of Sicilium, in the Brut of Griffith ap Arthur, and in several Dark Age 6th century poems in Wales. So we've got a massive evidence about this. What we're trying to say is, who is the Uther Pendragon? It clearly has to be Arthur. One of the problems has been is, how do you identify Caer Caradoc? Nobody appears to have bothered to find out. It hasn't been the subject of any research. The medieval said, well, there's a great circle at Caer Caradoc. Stonehenge is a great circle, that'll do, or Avebury. Well, Stonehenge is not the place, neither is Avebury. Caer means castle, the castle of Caradoc. Now we've got in Mid Glamorgan a big fortress mountain. It's called Fortress Mountain, Monte Gaia, and on it we have some strange things. We've got St. Peter's Church in ruin. The thing about St. Peter's Church is that it appears in the ancient Welsh histories as a place where Merddin Emrys meets the ambassadors of Vortigern. At Caer Caradoc we have Mynwent y Milwyr on this long mountain. Now Mynwent y Milwyr was built by Emrys Wledig around 470. He buried all the 363 major British nobles killed in the massacre with the Saxons at the peace conference. And he buried them in a giant circular monument known as the Grave Monuments of the Soldiers, Mynwent y Milwyr. It's still on the map. Right. Here on a 1980 Ordnance Survey map, you've got the Mynwent y Milwyr, this monument of the soldiers of the military on Monte Gaia, Fortress Mountain. We're going there. Now, in 1983, a mere 3 years later, we've got an addition to the maps in the form of a motorway, but up on Monte Gaia, here, right, can you focus in? We've lost the Mynwent y Milwyr. So we've gained a motorway and we've lost the most ancient and precious of the monuments. This is the monument of the soldiers. This is it, here. This is it. And you can see the whole of the bloody kingdom from here, just about. You can't see up the valleys, but you can see the whole bloody kingdom from this point. And it's said to be at Caer Caradoc. The big circle one. You can trace it out and walk around it. Dead bodies. Well, there's lumps and mounds here, and this is the perimeter of it here. You can see the mound, the perimeter of it, and it walks around here.
Geoffrey of Monmouth said that the circular monument of the soldiers, built in about the 5th century AD, was Stonehenge, but this is clearly one of Geoffrey's many confusions. For Alan Wilson, then, this site, taken together with other evidence, pointed to the location of Caer Caradoc here, in Morgannwg.
So we've got St Peter's Church at Caer Caradoc, and we've got Mynwent and Milwyr at Caer Caradoc. The highest part of this mountain, there's a grave mound still named Twyn Caradoc, the grave mound of Caradoc. That's what it says. Close to St Peter's Church and close to the ruins of ancient towers and walls of a castle, a caer, there is a giant ditch and mound, bolt-shaped circle, let's call it, in the ground. So we have a giant circle at Caer Caradoc. We've got St Peter's Church at Caer Caradoc, we've got the Mynwent and Milwyr at Caer Caradoc, and we've got Twyn Caradoc at Caer Caradoc, and we actually have a castle, a caer, or the ruins of it. All the names up here are evocative: the Ridge of the Soldiers, the Throne of the Knights, outpost forts defending the mountain, and so on. This is the edge of it. You trace the mound there. It is there. Okay. Seen it? Most vital identification in Britain. We began with 2 accounts from the ancient records of the secret burial of a king in a mummified form. We now have 10 accounts, most of them from the 6th century AD, contemporary with the death of King Arthur. These accounts actually name the mummified king who was wrapped in a leather bag and brought to this river for burial in a secret cave. His name was Arthur, and he's so named in the manuscripts. In the life of Illtyd and in Nennius, there's a strange story of a burial. A ship arrives at a river which is named the Iweni River. Well, it's easy to find the Iweni River. We've got a story of a ship coming in from the sea, and it bears the body of an embalmed or mummified man. It says, oh, it arrives at the mouth of the Iweni River. Well, this is the Iweni River. It runs up in this area to the mountain. It's in the area of Gwir. Well, this is Gwir, Ogre, right? It mentions Lwyngarth and Lyngarth. It means smooth ridges. Well, the smooth ridges are the great sand dunes that are there. And runners used to use them, long-distance runners, to train themselves up and down the sand dunes in modern times. It says, oh, St Illtyd is sitting at a cave mouth. He comes to the boat. 2 eminent people are with this corpse. They deliver the corpse, telling him the name of the person who was dead and wrapped up. And what happens is that St Illtyd is sitting at his cave. And the ship arrives, and there are eminent people in this boat that puts out from it, and they've got the body of a dead man, who was really some big guy. They bring it to Illtyd, swear him to secrecy, and he buries the corpse in the cave. Now, the cave exists, it's still there. Down there, my colleague will tell you about it, that's the woods down there, you see it on that hill? And in that woods down there, that's the Coed y Mwster woods where Arthur was put in the cave, first burial place. Go to the Coed y Mwster woods, there is a cave in a cliff. Here are the Coed y Mwster woods, the woods of mystery, where the cave of St Illtyd is. This is where Illtyd sat and where he received the body in 579 AD. Secret burial took place in the cave in these woods.
Now there exists in Wales at least 5 folk tales describing Arthur as lying asleep in a cave or under a mountain with 1,000 of his soldiers, awaiting the day when their help will be required by the inhabitants of Britain. But more importantly, according to the Welsh genealogies, St Illtyd and King Arthur are first cousins.
So we've got an account of a secret burial in Glamorgan at the very time that King Arthur, who's the only senior member of the royal clan who goes missing, is recorded as being concealed in his burial. And we've got his first cousin doing the burying in this cave. The cave was actually sealed up until about, it was 1886. A man from Cardiff went down there and he got a local quarryman and they put teeny bits of dynamite in, and they blew the opening out because stalagmite and stalactite had flowed down, not a lot of it, but it had sealed all the stones together. So he blew it open and went in. And there is a grave pit inside the cave. Duck your head down, because you have to keep down coming in, you know. Come on, duck down. Keep down here, only down here until I tell you. Right? Come on down. Come on, come on through. Keep your heads down. Ready? Right, you can come through another yard or two. Come through another yard or two. Now, here is the grave pit. You can see the squared off ends, square that end, squared right on there, very, very straight and square this side, and another square end that end. It's about 3.5, 4 feet wide, 3.5, 4 feet deep, and right across the cave about 11 feet long. Now that's the grave pit, exactly as described in the Life of St Uldid. The grave in the cave. It runs east to west, which is Christian fashion, east to west. Here we have something which is nothing short of miraculous, an amazing find. Two young men from the Cardigan College, it's a film college.
Okay.
They went along and they were filming in this cave, filming the grave pit. Above the thing, they panned across the side of the wall of the cave. And it's not until you get back and you look at it and say, oh, there's writing there. And it's covered with stalagmite, you see, so again...
It's very old.
It's very old.
So what did it say?
It's in the Welsh ancient British Coleman alphabet, and it says, this is the place of the bier of the highest ruler. And he's taken from that woods and he's brought to Caer Caradog, because two histories say that King Arthur is at Caer Caradog. One of the two accounts, one's in Iltyd and one's in the Marbles of Britain in Nennius, says how the body is later taken out to a church and placed near or in this church. Everything is pointing here, to this area. So the Uther Pendragon in the giant circle, because in the giant circle we find a grave mound. Uther Pendragon is in the giant circle at Caer Caradog. St Uldid is the undertaker, does the burying. St Uldid is the first cousin of King Arthur, King Arthur II. Add to this another story. We have a story of visitors coming from Brittany to visit the Cave of Arthur, the Grave of Arthur. They land on the coast, which is a coast of cliffs. Well, from Cardiff to the Iwenny is 35 miles of cliffs, steep ones. And they say how there's a little inlet, a little dell, a little dingle, a valley, a tiny valley, very green, beautiful, little stream running down it. They come ashore there, and on the one cliff on the one side is an ancient church, and the other is a fortress. On the one side we have Caen Eglwys, ancient church, and the other side we have the relics and ruins of a major fortress. Caen Eglwys is known to be the grave of King Ceri Longsword, who succeeded Caradog I to fight the Romans around the year 51 to 80 AD. These people land at this place, they come inland, they go all along Wooded Valley, which is still there between Llantryston and Llanharan. They come to a long mountain. This is a long sausage-shaped mountain. There is a little valley let into the mountain. There is a little valley let into the mountain. A stream runs down it. And it's so steep they have to get off their horses and lead them up the slope to get to the top, to the Grave of Arthur. And you'll still see people doing that today when they ride their horses around this mountain. And they are smack on target. We reasoned where this church would be, because just up above, a straight line up the river above the woods, and there's the ruin of St. Peter's Church. So one account then again says your stone there became a mystery. So we say, hey, there's a stone, you know, we got to look for this. So we started rooting about. This church had been abandoned about turn of the century, 1900-ish.
Okay.
So we got hold of the Church of Wales and we said, do you want to sell it? And they said yes. So we bought it. So we now owned it, so we could root about quite free from any hindrance. And we did find a stone.
And what did the stone say?
It's actually, either it's nonsense or it's lousy Latin. It says Rex Artorius Fili Mabrici, which would be...
King Arthur?
Yeah, but it should say Artorius Rex in good Latin. But we don't know who carved it. Perhaps it was some soldier or idiot who didn't know what he's doing. So this is a stone, and it does have carved lettering on it. And you can make them out there. It runs down to here and here.
Although this was found long before the excavation in 1990, Professor Talbot, the archaeologist, actually found the niche in the wall where the stone
could have been.
appears to have been.
So there you go. Well, it's very similar in shape to the Magna Cuba stone down at Nevin. The lettering is pretty close to the lettering. It's the same as lettering on other 6th century stones.
Let's come on to the excavation in 1990. Now, tell us first, Alan, about John Carr, because I think he wrote an article about the church that you mentioned earlier that you bought, trying to claim it was Norman. Is that right?
Yeah,
12th
what happened,
century.
John Carr, they were going to appoint a head of Cadw, Welsh heritage really, and I didn't get an interview. But John Carr, from Nottingham in England, knowing nothing about Welsh history, he got the job.
Right.
And it's a hopeless appointment. He's not a historian for a start. He shouldn't have been given the bloody job, but he got the job. He worked 21 years for Thompson Press, so work it out. Anyway, he suddenly, around before Christmas of 1990, right?
1990.
Maybe 89, he's right this
89,
article.
yeah.
And it played in the press, and it just simply said, St. Peter's Supermontum Church, is a 12th century Norman building. Well, people are ringing us up and saying, what's this about? What's this one column about St. Peter's being?
And you'd already declared it to be the oldest church
Hang on, yeah.
in Europe.
Well, what it would mean is that the Welsh triads would be wrong, because they nominate it as the most important church in the UK twice. The land of charters would be wrong. The history would be wrong, because King Lairug, Alathurus, could not have renovated it around the year 160. Emrys Wedig and his mother could not have been living there when they met the ambassadors of Vortigern around 450. Mm-hmm. That massive histories would be wrong. Everything would be wrong if that church is not there. Mm-hmm. It's just that the man was ignorant to the nth degree on history.
But do you think there's an ulterior motive why he's writing that article then?
Oh, yeah.
Which is what?
Oh, well, they simply don't want us proving that church is the place of Arthur or anything else. They don't. I mean, you've got an Englishman, he's coming to Wales, he knows bugger all about Welsh history, use the word. Mm-hmm. And he's obviously out of his depth. He's feeling out of his depth because people are constantly talking about us, and he doesn't know what the hell to say.
Now, you applied for permission to dig up this site in February 1990.
That's right.
And the authorities were supposed to give 7 weeks to respond.
Yeah, they have 7 weeks maximum. They can tell you the next day if yes or no.
Right.
But they took 24, 25 weeks.
Right. And so you didn't start the dig until late summer because of that?
Yeah, we had angry meetings with members of Parliament about it. What the hell's going on? They were trying to stop us doing the dig. Didn't want to be proved wrong. Right. We excavated the church in 1990, and we hired a whacking big marquee tent, 100 odd feet long, 30 feet wide, and we put this over the church. Put the entire thing under wraps. Hired some lighting. Got a generator up there to run that. Put a fridge up there for beer. And but you see, archaeologists are a bit primitive. They go out and they're just pouring with rain and they're working in the rain. All they can do is stick a tent over it. But doesn't make sense, And we did manage. We were then told, you can't just cut a trench to establish the age, you must excavate the entire church. We haven't got the bloody money for that, But hundreds of local people turned up. Masses of them. Couldn't cope with them. And so we did start going down. We found there had been 7 various stages of building. We were hit with the excavation in 1990 by a 100-mile-an-hour gale, can you believe it? All the papers went up. We had 3 little tents, one for an office, one for tools, and one for people to sleep in at night. they were miles away. People would come in and bring in papers they'd found in the field to us, notes on the excavation, 5-10 miles away,
And this is where you found the King Arthur burial cross.
Yeah, the cross is there.
Just tell us about the cross, Alan.
Richard Melbourne found it.
Richard Melbourne. Was he an archaeologist?
No, he's one of the diggers.
One of the diggers.
And
okay.
he found it. And
it's just here on the table.
It's on there. You want to see it?
Can I touch it with my hand now, or
yeah,
you rather
you
not?
touch it with your hand if you like.
Right. Okay. So tell us, Alan, what it's made from, because you've had it independently, scientifically
we asked,
analysed.
Yeah, we wrote to the National Museum of Wales and said, will you analyse it for us? No, if we're supposed to be forgers, we're not going to do that, are we?
Yeah.
We asked them to analyse it. They refused to analyse it. Some English archaeologists there refused to analyse it, okay?
But it's electrum, which is 79% silver, I believe.
Yeah, so we took it to the largest and most reputable company in this sort of business who do all the work for the oil companies and everybody else. And they've got all the systems there, and they have all the necessary tables and records historically, which show what the mix of various impurities would be in certain eras. You follow me?
Sure.
And they've tested it for us.
And tell us what the inscription on the front is.
Well, it says Artorius. And there's a man on a horse. You can pick him out in the middle.
Oh, in the middle there.
That's Arthur, I suppose.
On this cross here, that's King Arthur. Yeah.
Should be.
Is that King Arthur 1
Well, we
or
think it should be, but it doesn't say it is.
is it King Arthur 1 or 2 though?
2.
King Arthur 2.
Yeah. But we've got 5 feet down the shaft to try and get into the crypt, you see. 5.5 feet. And Pete Summer and and we got little rods of steel, which we could buy, steel rods. We tapped them down with a mallet, and they all went down to the same level. We found an area under 2 flat slabs that were about 6 feet long, 2.5 feet wide, and they were identical, but no markings on them. It's like the double door of it, you know, you go through a double door. And Alan Wishart, one of the archaeologists, excavated this, and we found the soil there. All the soil on the mountain is very black, heavy soil. But the soil in this area, about 5 feet by 5 feet, was light sandy stuff. It had been brought from somewhere else, you know. And he got down about 5.5 feet when the storm hit. So a friend of named Pete Summer and myself got down. We got some steel rods and we poked them down and we tapped them with a mallet. And they all went down the same depth, about 2.5 feet. And they were hitting a flat surface, which sounded like a stone, you know. So we think there's a slab stone. We believe there's a crypt there, because this shaft is not there for nothing.
Which you think...
There's a shaft, there's clearly a shaft about 5 feet by 5 feet.
So you think the body of King Arthur's in there?
Could be.
Is that King Arthur 1 or 2?
Be 2.
King Arthur 2, right, okay.
King Arthur 1's in Warwick.
But because the dig was wrecked, you'd run out of money? Had you?
Yeah,
so you couldn't actually excavate the rest of it? I mean, is that not... Has no one been back there since?
It was wrecked. There was huge storms. It was battered to pieces. We put a 6-foot fence around it, which you can legally entitled to do, as long as it's within 1 yard of the walls, you see. And we put a lovely steel gate on it, and that's been torn down and removed.
Been torn down and removed?
Aye.
Right. What, by vandals or?
A
farmer, right, okay, so, yeah.
And certainly there's a lot up on that hill, hell of a lot. Now in this church is a stone of King Ethael. Ethael was a brother of Morgan, and jointly Morgan and Ethael succeeded Arthur II. The stone of Ethael also names Illtyd, a first cousin of Arthur, and it also names on the bottom Arthmael. Arthmael, Iron Bear, is the normal calling of Arthur II. There are 2 other stones here. One is St. Samson. St. Samson is the son of Anna. Anna was a daughter of King Moirig. Therefore, Samson is a nephew of King Arthur, because Anna and Arthur are brother and sister. And another stone names a King Howell and his son King Rhys. And that is probably of the 7th century, around 750. Again, descendants of Morgan and Ethael. So you've got descendants of Arthur here, and you've got Arthur named on a stone. And that's quite significant. We've come here because a stone was found in this castle. It's an ancient 6th century stone, and there are 4 names upon it. It says how King Arthmael, Iron Bear, who was Arthur II, is granting land to 3 people for religious purposes, presumably. One is Nertat. Nertat is a daughter of Brocken of Brecon, who's Arthur's first cousin. Another is Philly the bishop, who was Ufelwyn, a bishop of Llandaff. And another one is Glwys, who is either Glwys Cernew, a father of King Gwyntlw, and Arthur arranged Gwyntlw's marriage to a daughter of Brecon, or alternatively, he's Glwys, a brother of St. Cadwch and a son of Gwyntlw. Either way, all the characters on the stone are all genuine, historical 6th century characters. They all fit.
Wilson and Blackett have also located the site of the Battle of Baden and the battles of Camlan and Longbourth. These were located simply by translating Welsh place names on publicly available maps of Britain.
One thing that could not be destroyed was the remains of a huge land reclamation scheme mentioned in the life of St Genovesius. This massive engineering feat confirmed South Wales as the home of Arthur.
Genovesius is a Breton monk who works with 2,004 other monks building dikes. He was building dikes under the supervision of St Illtyd. St Illtyd is a first cousin of King Arthur, Arthur II, son of Meirig. The dikes exist. There are masses of them. They run from the river. They used to run from the Taff in Cardiff to the Rummy River in Cardiff, from the Rummy River in Cardiff to the Ebble in Newport, from the other side of the Usk and the Ebble in Newport, eastwards again up to Chepstow. And the majority of them are still there, they're still in position. Reason for the dikes is that all the land behind them is well below sea level. So it was a huge land reclamation exercise, and masses of canals, like a checkerboard or chessboard system, cross and crisscross this landscape, draining it. This remarkable construction is post-Roman and pre-Norman. The interesting thing is that the life of Genovesius says Genovesius is working on the dikes in the land of Arthur. And Illtyd is the instructor or engineer in charge. So the land of Arthur is South East Wales.
If King Arthur was a Glamorgan king, where was his Camelot? Though today there may not be much to see, there was once a castle standing on this site. A wedding was recorded as taking place here as late as 1453. It was called the Yellow Fortress, or Caer. Could this be Camelot?
It may have got its name from the nearby sulphur springs of Yellow Wells Farm. There's a number of houses in the area, the grey house, the brown house, the blue house, the ancient manor houses. Yellow Wells Farm is just below. This place is Caer, a castle. Melin is yellow. So Caer, Melin can easily be seen, perhaps translated into sort of Norman French as Camelot or Camelot. In this direction, you can see that's the south wall going along there. When we go over there, you'll see what a big drop it is. That's the south wall, down to the corner of the field. And you've got clearly, when we get down there, you film it better, an eastern wall and a north wall there. And so you've got a large enclosed area. This was the area of this castle. And like I told you, it was a castle in 1453, and the main area. It was the main place of the entire area. Cardiff was in the parliamentary hundred of Keebor, not the other way around. This was the central, most important place in this entire district, this where you're standing now. And this was the place of the castle of the Glamorgan kings. It's quite possible. The whole point is it's also known as Keebor. And Keebor, C-U, means mutually together, and Bwrdd means table. So Keebor means mutually together table. That's evocative in the Arthurian sense. And so until very recent times, this ancient field and castle was the most important place in this entire area. There's no doubt about that. And there's no doubt it was the ancient residence of the Glamorgan kings.
In Cardiff.
It's got two names. It's called Keebwrdd. Key is mutually together, and Bwrdd is table. How about it?
Round table.
Just below it is still Yellow Wells Farm. It was the Yellow Fort, Camelot.
Camelot. So is this Arthur II who had Camelot?
Yes.
Not Arthur I?
I know.
So Arthur II had Camelot, had the round table.
Well, Keebwrdd, Keebor. It was even in Norman times. It was not you couldn't. It was the royal cantref. You couldn't tax it. It was not taxable.
This part of Cardiff.
That area. Yeah. Well, what we call the centre forts. In other words, the major fortresses were surrounded by a ring of little teeny outer fortresses as signalling places to signal inwards. And you get one over there is Pentra Meirig, head manor of King Meirig, Arthur's daddy. That's a centre fort. And then you got one that way, Caerleon, right? The castle of Leon the Mighty, Caerleon. They've confused Isca, the Roman fortress, with a Welsh fortress half a mile to the north of it called Caerleon. And they think the Roman fort is at Caerleon. It's not. Caerleon is actually a big Welsh fortress on a hill. So Arthur is always associated with Caerleon in all the legends and romances. They're the biggest hill forts in Britain. And most of you won't be able to see a thing, because he don't do anything with it. And he don't do anything to preserve it, protect it, anything. But this is Arthur's hill fort. This is Caerleon, Castle of Leon. And from here, looking down that side, you can see Malpas. Arthur's said to be looking down from his castle, watching people across his Malpas. Well, you can. But you couldn't see people from that Roman place, which they mistake as Caerleon. And this actually is the British fortress on a hill, where he would have been. And it's totally neglected, as you see. There's no damn thing you can see. Most of you can't see anything, can't do anything. So, of course it's sad, because this is the place where the tourists would come. Now, the Palace of the Kings is just outside Lampeter Major.
Ah, right.
It covers about 4 or 5 acres. The walls stick up from under the ground. They started excavating about 1903. They were excavating 1903, and men in suits arrived. That means people from London, and stopped the excavation. One of the rooms is 50 feet long and so wide. They tried to say it was destroyed in 293 when Caron or Carausius was killed, but it's no radio jab and dating. It's on end of the Arthurian kingdom. Now you can see it there.
There's the palace in the middle. This is this ancient palace of the kings of...
Bits of marble all over the place. I got a piece the size of one of those books, marble, I brought from there. So where they brought marble from, I don't know. Apparently, the bit they excavated, there are mosaics on the floors and murals on the walls.
Wow.
So,
and it's not Roman?
No, it's the British king. Yeah, so we've got a buried city under Caercaradoc, the hill with St. Peter's Church, where Arthur II, and nobody's doing anything about it. Anywhere else on planet Earth, they'd be digging it up. And a buried palace of the king.
Okay.
From my own perspective, there are some very simple observations I would like to make to conclude this programme. Wilson and Blackett started in 1976 trying to find the truth about King Arthur. After 14 years of intensive research, they purchased a church which this research was suggesting was the likely burial site of the legendary king. They excavated that site in 1990, and an artefact was unearthed by a digger. This occurred when Wilson and Blackett were not at the site. The object is a solid electrum cross, which could have only been made for an important or wealthy person. It has been dated to the period of Arthur, which is prior to 600 AD, and has an inscription which reads, "For the soul of Arthur." What are the chances of finding that artefact by coincidence at the very site they claimed could be the King Arthur burial site? The academic establishment will not look at these findings, which suggests there is something seriously wrong with these academics, who get paid with our tax money to run universities and sit in academic departments. Wilson and Blackett have always been and are still willing to work with the academic establishment in an effort to help find further truths within our history. If there are any academics watching, please contact them. They are ready and willing to speak to you.
A buried city in Britain? If they found one in Egypt, they'd be going bananas. Wouldn't they?
It does
It
beggar
beggars the
belief, doesn't it?
imagination.
It does.